All right, what's up, everybody? Apparently, my audio says I am screaming.
Ah!
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Alternative Blacks podcast, live here on the Tube of You. Yeah, we're working on that intro because that is not it.
That is not it.
That is not it.
The tube of you.
The Tube of You. I am still here drinking my pre-show beer, so we're not going to disclose what I am drinking.
All right.
But what are you
So
drinking,
then should I
Chris?
let's say should I disclose what I'm drinking then?
Always, yeah.
Uh Always from the fantabulous Breskies because it's on the way home. And this is With My Hellions by Twin Elephant. And it's only a 4%er here.
So
It's a dark mild.
it doesn't count. That's not beer.
It's a dark mild for my dehydrated ass because it's 90 plus degrees and humid.
Yo, today was awful. Let's talk about weather. Welcome to the Weather Podcast. Today's weather is fuck you.
Yeah, seriously. And I literally drove through torrential downpours on the way home. Like I left my office, walked to my car, the sun was beating down on me. About 20 minutes from home, torrential downpours. Like roads are starting to flood. I can barely see in front of me. Get home, no rain. So it was literally just like a fuck you on the commute home.
Yo, it was literally like, we're going to screw you over on the walk to your car. We're going to kill you during the drive. And then when you get out, you know what? It's going to be hot and more humid.
Yeah, exactly. And then the electric was having some issues with like the storm passing over.
It's electric. Well,
Like this beer, very delicious. I know it's only 4%, but it's a dark mild. What do you expect? I think it's very delicious and nutritious.
delicious, nutritious, seditious,
Expeditiously
consumed. French. Yes. Wow. Yeah. So that sounds like an amazing beer. I will actually disclose my pre-beer because I'm making fun of you for having a, what was it, 4%?
Yeah.
And I am drinking my pre-game 4% beer, which is my slightly
It's literally
mighty.
a light beer.
That's why it's a pre-game beer. You are drinking, your show beer is a pre-game beer.
But my pregame beer was 6.5%.
So we're doing it backwards.
We are. Different approaches,
Yeah, because my show beer is 4%.
You are full of shit over there.
I am. Speaking of electrical, you can see the electrical. And so for anybody that is watching and does not quite recognize the setup, I have officially moved into a new house. A house that we have a mortgage on.
You all right there, bud?
It's a terrifying sentence. So this is going to become the studio space for the Alternative Blacks podcast. So you should be seeing a video coming out, just kind of going over what the basement looks like, asking for some recommendations and advice on, for those of you that have put a studio together in your basement, what worked, what didn't work. Outlets are always needed, and then we have 4 more than originally were down here. So that's a good plus. But keep an eye out for that on the YouTube content because this has the potential of being something really cool, really fun. We're going to try to brew here. We're going to try to produce some content and episodes out of here. So that's the announcement.
That's the announcement.
And big shout out to Chris for helping move some of the stuff down here, like this big ass locker behind me.
Fuck that locker.
You see why Hannah did not want to have anything at all to do with that locker?
Funnily enough,
what are you making cakes?
Funny enough, I would say that it's the hardest thing objectively to move, but I feel like because we gave it so much deference, like it wasn't that bad. You know what I mean? Like if we would have gave the other stuff that much like deference on moving, it probably would have went smoother.
Yeah. Looking at my look at my dresser, and I was just like, "Are there scrape marks on that?" And I'm like,
No,
"Nah, no. You still have the paint?" And she goes, "Yes." I'm like, "Then no,
no.
no." These are not the.
Listen,
This is not the dresser you're looking for.
I it better be after doing all that moving.
We accidentally went to the third floor and took their dresser.
I doubt you want to be anywhere near that third floor.
Mm-mm. Anyway, today we will be talking about genetically engineered yeast and sustainability in brewing. That is going to be the topic for today. You said your beer was pretty good, so we can kind of jump straight into this conversation. Both of us actually read the first article and have been skimming through the second article trying to get caught up. But the second article is something that we have talked about, not at nauseum, but we've definitely had to focus on what does sustainability look like in brewing. So I guess the first thing to do is jump into genetically modified yeast. What the fuck does that mean?
So it's gene editing, which
Like
is
Belcher?
no, we're not editing him.
Because he cannot be contained.
He cannot be contained. No, it is though. Basically, it's the like purposeful selection of genes from one batch of yeast to the next, right? So like it's easier to think about like with corn, or just say you have two plants
But I
and
got me a few
you want
on.
two plants, but I got me a few palms.
Oh! That was fire. That was fire.
I think the best way to describe it would be to talk about something that actually underwent this, which is actually a lot of the fruits and vegetables we have. But the big one is like the wild mustard plant, right? And how, if you didn't know this, there are like 20, 30 different vegetables that come from the same wild mustard plant, right? Do you know this?
No, you said vegetables. And
Vegetables.
all I could think about was silly wabbit.
Silly wabbit. Vegetables are for adults.
But there's how many varieties of vegetables that we get from the mustard? Wild mustard?
Hellas.
Hellas?
Yeah,
So the Germanic beer?
no, that's Hellas. This is Hellas, which is the scientific
Beer.
amount for a fuck ton. No, you got like
You got a fuck ton and you got Hellas.
cauliflower. Yeah, you got cauliflower, broccoli, I think Brussels sprouts, kale, spinach, like all of that stuff comes from the same plant. So like in that sense, it was less scientific because it was more about like in the regions they were at. They would
makes that
cultivate
variant.
Yeah, so they would cultivate it. Well, humans cultivate it for different things. So like Brussels sprouts are cultivated specifically for the sprouts to grow much larger. So over time, you get these huge stalk sprouts over time. Or like with kale, it's about cultivating. You take the plant that has the larger looking curly leaf on it with this plant that has the larger looking curly leaf out of the batch you have, and you cross pollinate those two, and so on and so forth until you end up with kale. Or collard greens is the same thing.
Yes.
It's a whole cauliflower, broccoli, like all of those. It's a whole list of like common vegetables that all come from the same wild plant, and it's because of this cross pollination purposefully by whatever group of people were doing it. So here we have the same thing, except instead of in a plant, it's in a I guess what is yeast technically counted as?
Uh, yes, yeast is an organism.
It is an organism, but so are plants, I guess.
I just wanted to be somewhat right.
Yeast. What is yeast? We know
All,
it's alive.
all I'm gonna say is that wild mustard conversation, it's a fungus, is
It's a
wild.
fungus. Yeah. No, look it up. Look it up. Go look it up for yourself.
Well, but everything that you just said there is important. I think we didn't. So sometimes we can go on tangents, and that could very easily become one of those. However,
Yeah.
I think it was very important and very spot on about, when we're talking about genetically engineered or genetically modified organism, right? GMO. Um, I think it's a very important conversation because maybe we weren't doing it on such a precise level before, but so much about what we've done with not even like plants, but like dogs, like just things over time have been specially created just for this. I mean, even irrigation systems and just like agriculture and everything that
Yeah.
humans have done throughout the ages has always been in order to one fast track stuff, make things more efficient, make things sometimes healthier, but usually just more abundant and more readily
More abundant
available.
and yeah. Or safer, you
What
know.
safer is actually a very very good way to put it as well, and I think that's what we're looking at when we're talking about maybe less on safe with the genetically modified yeast, not like what I've been like reading as and said something about, oh, these dangerous yeasts have been
Yeah.
fucking over beer drinkers for centuries. Um,
Yeah, there's really a whole style of them where they're wild, you know.
but I
But
think this article was really talking about modifying yeasts in order to create specific flavor notes, and it was actually where this conversation or where this not even conversation where this industry becomes dangerous to other people in the beer industry is hop farmers, because a lot of the flavors that you're getting, especially these tropical and these fruity notes, are coming out of your hops, and now that you're able to get these flavors out of different elements of your beer because of these engineered and modified yeasts, hop farmers are now worried that they're going to like basically get put out of business from what I read or how I interpreted this article. And I think
yeah,
that's really
I
interesting. I don't like I think
maybe I
there's
don't know enough, but I'm kind of skeptical of that. I mean, it's just like the hop itself is such like it's not a fad. I guess it's a fad, but it's about hop. It's not about like the yeast imparting these flavors. Like the hop
I
is
I
such an
think
integral part.
I think where you'll see like big changes is like on the macro level for sure, maybe like someplace like Sam
Yeah.
Adams, um, Anheuser-Busch, InBev, these are the places that you're going to really see
Yeah.
those early
And you're
adopters
right.
almost.
You're right. But at the same time, perhaps perhaps money is there in terms of just like a steady stream of need for hop farmers that are making, cascade hops going, mass production, something that's probably at this point easy to make in terms of hops. If you're thinking, it is what it is. It's simple. It's been probably it's down to like an efficient science on how to grow to get the best yield and how to, do everything with the least amount of cost and waste so that you can make the most amount of profit. So maybe there is something to be said there. In terms of like craft beer though, I kind of feel like hops are so hops are so
It's
specific.
gonna take generations for that to like
I mean,
disappear,
but
if it
yeah,
ever
but it's like
does.
yeast. I mean, but like a yeast is a fungus and hops are a plant. They have different compounds and chemicals in them that we use for beer. And the yeast is really just there to create the alcohol and provide funk. in the case that you want funk.
Right.
Or in this case, what they're using it for right now, which we never really specified, but in this case, this article's talking about the fact that they've genetically modified yeast so that you can get rid of
That buttery agent,
that buttery
diacetol
off.
or whatever.
Yeah, acetol, is it?
I thought it was like diacetyl.
Diacetyl. Yeah,
Diacetyl. It's never mind.
diacetyls. Yeah, so it's to get rid of that flavor. That's something that is an off flavor in a lot of beers
Right.
that you don't want there.
Which, when you do a lot of like the Cicerone tests and everything, they like that's part of it. But that's part of where you also get those flavors a lot of the time is from how things are preserved, how things are things clean. Like it can be agent of like the yeast and everything like that, but it can also be so many other factors that create that buttery like thing. When you're able to completely say no, this variable is no longer at play, like it makes it easier to identify where there are issues, because there are definitely not breweries, but there's definitely bars that I've gone to where that buttery flavor came out, and I was like, there's no way Voodoo Ranger or Kona or like have
because if it just fights the flavor of the beer, like you can taste, you're like, this isn't it's not necessarily bad, but it's just like this is off,
right? And it's just like, okay, I'm not coming back here, or like there are bars that I don't get anything off the tap system.
True. So then it's kind of like, and that's the thing, right? And it even mentions it in the article specifically, where it's like this buttery flavor is specifically bad in hoppy beers.
Yeah.
Because you have butter and bitter together.
Who doesn't love?
Who wants that?
Buttery bitter popcorn.
Butter bitter.
Butter butter.
So is butterbeer from Harry Potter just like
awful,
really unkempt beer?
Unkempt,
yes, unkempt, magically unkempt.
I think so.
It's magically unkempt.
Little goblin running around. But I can't remember specifically what happened in the article. The people that are running this initiative, that like this organization, I think they're 2 Berkeley students that are doing this project. They heard the concerns from the hop farmers, and they definitely pivoted their approach to what they're trying to utilize this for. It's supposed to now be in conjunction with hops. It's not supposed to be something that is meant to replace hops. But again, going back to the sustainability element of it, I think that could also help greatly reduce water waste. I think even if hop farmers were able to then focus on maybe even slightly smaller batches of things. I mean, and these binds of hops, right, that are grown are these large fucking things that could eat. I mean, it's a vine, right? It's like it could easily just get out of control.
Yeah.
And I think if you're able to take a look at farming and these systems a little more intentionally, it has a potential, I think, to even bring better like profits to them, because now they can say, okay, not only is our supply down, but like we can have better quality, and which could potentially bring our demand up, and now we can put a better, like, higher premium on this shit, right?
True.
Which goes against then what we're trying to do is bring craft beer at a more sustainable, more approachable, especially financially, level, which could very well mean by the time we're getting to creating some beer that we do look at more yeast flavored or flavored.
So here's my only thing
produced
about
beer.
yes, I think by the time we get there, that will be more of a thing.
As an
Whether it
option,
has whether it has the same effect,
remains
like
to be seen, right?
yeah, because so yeah, like they're coming out with or they're experimenting with yeast that can impart these like tropical flavors. But that's one side of the story, like a tropical flavor, right? That like there are plenty other hops outside of tropical hops. Those are just popular, right? That give you and impart different flavors. And then also it's about a ratio, right? Because the flavor of something is way more about the aromatics and less about the taste because we really only taste the base bitter, sweet, sour, salty, savory. Is that it?
Well,
And like all of that melding in between is coming from our noses and the volatile compounds that are being released when we smell something or drink something and it's releasing those vapors. The mixture of those compounds, the specific mixture for each of these hops, so different. And I gotta imagine that whatever the yeast is in creating to impart that is another difference altogether. So it might it might cut in a little bit,
mm-hmm.
but I don't know that it'll completely replace something like that because I feel like it's going to be different. I feel like people are going to taste it and be like, "Ah, this is like that fake tropical hop flavor." It's going to be, I don't really like this yeasty tropical flavor. It's very distinct and different from tropical hop flavor. So I feel like it's one of those things where it's going to cut in a little bit, but I feel like it's still going to be something, especially in craft beer where people are so particular about things like that.
Right.
As
Well,
consumers, I
so
think it'll be fine.
so what I think too is for instance, we're talking about these tropical elements, and like currently, like tropical hazy IPAs are still pretty popular in it.
Popular.
Right. So with that being said, while we enjoy a good hazy from time to time, it's not necessarily our favorite anymore. And there's other styles of beers that we would much rather put time, energy, money into creating a good quality. And not even to say like a good quality versus that wouldn't be a good quality. I think this will still be good quality product. But where does our focus want to be? There have been so many interviews that I've read or heard talking about, we make the hazy IPA because that's what's going to bring people in. Our passion projects are this, this, and that. If we find a cheaper way, a more efficient way, something that brings down costs and allows us to put that cost somewhere else, I think it could have a lot of benefits to brewing because I think you can say, okay, if this creates an all right tasting hazy IPA or a hazy IPA that can transition people into something else, let's use it here. And the other part I wanted to bring up though was the scientific element of it, right? This is the part that I don't know as much about when it comes to hops and everything, but like everything that's going on with the hop, the oils, and everything that are happening when you're putting those in, is that really that easily um, substituted
Replicated?
with replicated
Yeah.
with this yeast? Is that are they really going to be able to do all the other nuanced things? And I think that's what you were kind
No.
of alluding to,
Yeah. I don't think they will.
right?
Because I think that the yeast might give off a nuanced flavor, but it's going to be different, right? It's just going to be different. I feel like the yeast, if you're going to create like a tropical ale, right? But you're using yeast to create the tropical notes that the tropical hop might normally take. I feel like at this point, it's just going to become its own beer style.
That
Like it's just going to be a different beer style.
that's
It's
what
going
I
to
was
be a
going to
yeast
ask.
ale,
Yeah,
a
that's what
yeasty
I was
ale.
going to. It's a yeasty IPA.
Oh, a YTA,
Yeah.
YPA,
Oh,
a yeast,
YDA.
YDAF. I don't know.
An
I don't.
Imperial White.
Hold on a second. Do we need to trademark a beer style name now to get ahead of this? Apparently, I still haven't figured out how to pour a crowler, even one with a twist lid.
Those remind me of those like gigantic Monster Energy drinks that used to exist.
They do, but you know what? I can't pour a regular pop cap, so
Pop cat, but I got me up. Blah, blah.
pop cap. No, something like the yeasty pale ale or yeast, something along those lines.
I think you're absolutely right with this. Like nail on the head, hammer on the head, nail, blammer, wham,
Hammerhead.
jam,
Wham
toucan
bam, thank
Sam.
you. Yeah, toucan Sam.
But it's definitely interesting. One of the things that I continuously look at when we're talking about the brewery is the sustainability element of it. What's going to be done in order to create a greener brewery? I think that's always going to be the focus. We had a whole conversation about who really is going to be the pioneer of that. Is it these larger industry titans like Lagunitas, Sam Adams? Are they going to be the ones that are responsible and have the capital, have the um,
The
be
time
able to
almost.
afford to lose out on time and energy and
Yeah,
resources on this? Or is it going to be somebody that like really takes a risk and says from the get, this is what we're doing, and it's going to slow production down, especially on this like micro or nano of a scale. And so that remains to be seen as beer goes forward. Beer is still considered to be, at least from my perspective, on the rise. You're still seeing breweries open up, even though you have states like New Jersey. I want to see them fail.
you got you throw shade at New Jersey every single
show.
live,
Because fuck
every
Jersey.
show.
Fuck Jersey. Fuck them across the river. Every time I'm near that river, I go.
Yeah, your only fatal flaw of moving to Philadelphia is that you are now on
Closer.
Jersey's doorstep.
Jersey's. You make
You're on Jersey's
one wrong
doorstep,
turn, and you are
and you're
quite
across a
literally
bridge
in Jersey. And they don't
in
allow you
a
to.
not great area
Yeah. Well,
of Jersey.
not great area of Jersey who had the audacity to say, "Keep it out of here, Philly."
Did they really?
Yeah, the mayor. There was
Camden?
there was like a shooting at like a park or something. They're like, "Keep your animals in Philly," and I was like, people get
Have y'all been to your own city?
people in Philly get stressed on the fact that they have to drive into Camden by accident and turn around.
Yeah.
I don't know the
Yeah.
last time I was like, oh shit, I'm in Philly. I know the last time I was like, oh fuck, I'm in Camden.
I know the last time I said, "Oh shit, I'm in Philly."
When you were moving shit.
No,
Don't
I knew
count
I was
this
going to Philly
weekend.
then. Yeah, I knew I was in Philly. I didn't just like drive aimlessly and then shit, I'm in Philly. uh no, you're 100% correct. Although, we're losing all that New Jersey viewership because you keep slandering New Jersey, you know. All that Garden State money coming in.
Yeah, no, fuck. They're going to restaurants. They're not going to breweries. Who gives a fuck? The people that are still going to the breweries are like, yeah, fuck Jersey. Fuck Jersey. Why am I here?
Then they go across the river for a beer
It's just insane.
in Philly.
I just want to know who's like monitoring that kind of shit either, because it doesn't seem like. I feel like if the restrictions that are getting put on them were actually.
Well,
I
the thing was,
it's more of
the
a
thing
show. It's
is,
a power move.
yeah, it's a power move. I think and now I espouse the crazy conspiracy theory. And maybe that's not the answer, but it is political, I think.
It's
You know,
100%
it's got to
political.
be. So I think it's just
Some
people that have influence and sway
are in the
on the
restaurant
people on the,
industry,
yeah,
and for
that's really
some
all it
reason they
is.
have hands in the pockets of the politicians, and they said breweries are operating at such a lower cost because they don't have to really deal with this liquor license in the same way that we are doing it with it. It's not the same type of agreement, and therefore, because they aren't paying as much, they should be limited, and it should be benefiting us. Which, when you hear
Yeah.
it, it is the biggest "fuck you, I have privilege" like
Yeah,
thing.
it really is because breweries have the flexibility because they're actually making another product, including the food.
Right. It's not like, oh, these restaurants are making the food, making the alcohol, making the
Yeah.
beer, and oh, what, they
It's
just
like
gonna
no, they're
show up?
yeah, it's like no, they're actually making beer, and then they're also supporting local businesses if they don't have food by bringing food trucks in,
And then you pull that
supporting
away.
small local businesses.
Right.
And now that's not allowed.
Right. Because the fine dining industry in Jersey was like, ah, we don't want to compete with those smaller things that have food trucks. Get out of here. But
Which is weird because like it's two completely different vibes. Like you go to if you're gonna go to like a nice restaurant, you're not thinking, I really need to go to a nice restaurant. Well, I could go to nice restaurant A, or we could just go down to the brewery. You know, it's
right.
like it's very deliberate for most people where they're gonna go. To me, they're not the same thing. But anyway,
I'm actually interested in a brewery that has a fine dining experience and like actually sets it up to be a like, we have a brewery element that you can like do, but
Boobies,
what?
Boobies Brewery in Mount Joy, they have a
Boobies?
fine Boobies. B-U-B. Get your mind out of the gutter, Tyler.
Out of the cleavage.
Bubbies or
Get
something.
your
Anyway,
get your mind out of the
they
cleavage.
they are a brewery. They
Okay.
have like their pub tavern, right? But then like the basement, their cellar is a fine dining restaurant that looks better than that.
Welcome to
But
my fine dining experience. I missed the pool. No, it's not because I'm
uh
drunk, but because one is like a straight up pole and one is like a triangular one. Like it's like a rectangular side and a triangular side. And I went to like grab at the same thing, and this one missed. Anywho, um, what are we talking about? GMOs?
yeah, since we talked about Jersey and then we were saying how the beer industry is failing to sustain anything because of the liquor control board there. So we're on the topic of sustainability, basically.
And while we're trying to make the segue over to sustainability, I did want to bring up one more thing on the GMO side because you actually brought it up prior to starting today's live. Uh, is GMOs just even that phrase, right? That if I remember correctly, GMOs was a big conversation point during like the 2008 to like 10, so we'll call it 2007 to 2010. That big span of time. We were talking a lot about like the milk. We were talking about
Milk,
just
the
like
milk.
being the milk, being in the inner city, being in one of the poorest cities in America at the time. Um, it it was a big conversation about what was going into the food because you saw a lot of development in our area, whether it was just like people being taller, stronger, faster, bigger, um, just even girls developing quicker, right? Like it there was a big conversation on GMOs back then. And back then GMO sounded like this like dirty word, right? Like this I don't know, what was your take on this? Because what we are talking about right now with genetically modified yeast is the same thing, is it not?
It is. It's the exact same thing. The thing is, I think part of it is there's a lot of people that don't like humans playing God, right? Because we are taking what's natural and we are forcing something that would otherwise not happen, at least for generations at a time. So I think there's a taboo with that.
Can we? I know you have a point, but can we address this real quick? Because
What are we dressing?
playing God here,
Playing God thing?
yeah.
I
Because
I think that's what a lot of it is.
right,
I like
but this is the part I want to address, the playing God element, right? It's there's so many different arguments when it comes to God, and one of those things is just like, oh, just if I pray or whatever, one, I'll be forgiven, or like if I pray, oh, my problems will be solved or whatever. And then like a lot of times you'll hear people say, oh, God will give you the tools to solve the issue, or to solve the problem, right? Like God is giving you this ability to do all these things. And then it comes back to, well, God gave me the ability to do this. He has equipped me with the skills to do this, to enhance life and to make things better, right? It's just like, you wouldn't say God gave
I
me the tools to help like shovel my next door neighbor's yard, but because or sidewalk, but because God also gave them that ability, I don't have to help them out, even though it's something I'm like really good at doing, right?
yeah. I think it gets into like an into the weeds conversation on religion and God in
I know I
general that
mentioned
we don't
yard, but I was
need to
talking
have.
about the sidewalk, not the yard. Who cares about weeds?
All right, that was extremely specific. You need to get something off your chest there, bud.
I am so sorry. You were saying.
Um, I think it gets into a nuanced and weedy conversation that we don't have time for to get into, or we're not really talking about that. But I do think on this topic in general, I think it is a little bit of that. And I think, the way that I think about it is the fact that first off, everything natural doesn't automatically mean it's good, and it doesn't automatically mean it's bad. It's just different. So when we make something like this, like you mentioned the fact that, oh, we have the ability to make something better,
Right.
you know, excuse me. I would say that we're not making something better in general. It's just something that's better for us. The general idea of it is just it's just different than what is current, because everything, there's a connotation of natural being best. Oh, it has to be all natural diet, all this stuff, no artificial this and that, right? But natural also means disease and death and dying and all of these things. Like nature is all of that. So it's not necessarily good bad, it's just this is nature. We're trying to make it easier for ourselves to exist in nature. And in this case, we're saying we have this thing that we enjoy, and we have this, off effect that we don't like. So we're going to create something different that's better for us. It's not better or worse. This yeast isn't better or worse than its predecessor in nature. Absolutely. It's just better for the particular purpose that it's serving in this instance. And I think like expanding that in general to GMOs, I think, the whole thing about GMOs before was, it is just like, it's not real, it's not natural. We go back to the mustard plant conversation. That's genetic
I
modification.
mean,
It's
like,
just done over generations versus us now being able to go in and down to the level of a gene, and instead of in 20 generations, it's in one.
true, but because I was going
but
to
it's
bring
the
up,
same thing.
we're talking about our salmon, we're talking about our carrots, we're talking about our like watermelon, like all these things that don't
Bananas.
look like what they used to.
Yeah, like Cavendish bananas, they're all clones of each other. They're all the same exact thing. They have to clone them because they're sterile. And all the bananas we have now aren't the original bananas that were cultivated and spread throughout. These are different bananas. So like we've been doing this forever. It's not something completely foreign to us.
But you know why it becomes news and why it becomes these conversations. It's ways to potentially disrupt industries, or it's the age old weed tobacco.
The wacky tobacco and the regular tobacco.
There's a large part of like this industry, like we're at the very tail end of the tobacco dynasty, right? Um, in the sense of it was safe to smoke while pregnant. You know, it was you
Yeah,
know
all that
it was
stuff.
healthy
Yeah.
to smoke at one point, right? So you're past all of that stuff, but there was all of these, the ganja makes you want to kill, all these things that happen with marijuana. And when you go back to it, it's just like, oh, marijuana could have been a much more profitable like crop, right? And the tobacco industry that had a lot of power and sway, if we're going back to New Jersey in this conversation, right, decided they didn't want that competitor and they wanted to like kind of push that out. So we're coming from the South, so I'm just assuming on there's just a lot of assumptions for me coming out. However, I think we are seeing that too at play a little bit when it comes to GMOs. I don't know necessarily the who it benefits. I just don't have enough, I guess, interest or knowledge on who's really the beneficiary here, because it's
Generally or with the yeast?
uh,
Just
both,
generally?
just both. Because
Yeah, like
I mean, it's
I
not
would well I would
farmish.
say yeah, I would say generally, one farmers do benefit because you're talking about obviously modifying plants to be resistant to things that would kill them off,
Hmm.
being more resistant to those types of things, being resistant to pesticides that are being put on plants. And now the pesticide, that's a whole other thing, right? But
I
like
don't need to get into that
every
conversation.
but it's the idea of like being able to yield more food. And I think a big portion of the way we approach GMOs and crops in general when we talk about this type of stuff comes from a place of privilege and a place of abundance. We are able to be choosy about what type of corn we get. We're able to be choosy about these things because we have the stock, we have the nutritional availability that other places don't. So there's utility to these things, even if we don't see it particularly for ourselves, you know. Um, so there's that conversation as well. And I would just say to close out this and then move into the sustainability thing. One, this kind of rolls into the sustainability because it's talking about being able, you can modify this yeast to be able to survive at better temperatures. So now you don't have to have heating costs or cooling costs
So
so high,
you hit
stuff like that.
a point that I was gonna wait until you were done talking, Lucy. If you do not get out of here,
It's not a podcast if Lucy doesn't
God
come
damn it,
jumping up on.
I'm trying to find a moral imperative has historically driven sustainability. Says Matthew the sustainability ambassador at the Brewers Association. With changing climate altering the way businesses must operate, sustainability will soon be synonymous with survival, he says. The sooner brewers tackle those challenges, the better equipped they'll be for surviving the next industry defining upheaval, be it crop failures, water shortages, or scarcity in the workforce. And that is I think that is the biggest point to watch. What businesses do well, the ones that are able to pivot and continue moving no matter what happens, right? And who have a plan when the unexpected happens. I think one of the most frustrating things post COVID was to watch like industries, I mean, businesses still be so relaxed on things rather than saying, okay, cool, we never thought we would survive or exist. I know I'm trying to make sure the cat doesn't end up somewhere. We never expected this to happen, and it did, and now we had to deal with it. But rather than trying to look around and identify what other areas they may lack in case something happens, and they don't have to be so specific as like COVID, but like just to be like, here are 4 areas that we have identified as potential issues in the future. I don't know how many industries are really being like, let's take a look at that. And beer being able to really identify not COVID, not COVID is a health thing, but like climate change things that are on the horizon. We know these things are going to be an issue. That is where the sustainability conversation comes from. I'm unplugging you, and I'll figure out what my cat is doing.
All right. And I will talk about I'll bullshit till you get back. Agreed. Agree with that. I would say, I think once again, if it's not taking away from the bottom line of the company, they'll do it to keep the bottom line there. If it's not producing a profit of any sort, they're not going to be proactive. So that's where regulation comes in, right? So that's kind of the thing where, like in my world, that's what I see, right? Like environmental stuff is just you're taking off the bottom line. There's no business benefit to a lot of it. If there were, they would be doing it already, right? In terms of creating a process that's less wasteful, you do that because money. That's what every business is about, is you do it because money.
I mean, like
And
we're seeing so many electrical cars coming out because there's tax incentives to do that now.
right, there's tax incentives. And so like it's one of those things you need. I think it's tricky because it's like you don't want the government to overreach on certain things, but at the same time, you also need sometimes to step in and force things to happen. You know, I obviously am more attuned with air when it comes to climate change and that type of thing. So I'm more in tune with the history or more knowledgeable on the history of regulation of different industries who kind of head that off, right? And it's one of those things where it's like, one, if the regulation never happened, then what we're experiencing this summer with these wildfires from Canada blowing all this smoke, that was just normal back then and worse for a lot of people, you know. So unless something happens where the government's going to step in and regulate it to a particular degree, however that is, you know, businesses there's going to be few businesses that are actually going to, part with that bit of their profit, that margin of their profit, to create something more sustainable up until the point where it is completely proven that no one's going to have water, at a point unless you do X, Y, and Z, or no one's going to be able to live because the climate's so bad that you now have to stop doing what you're doing. So until then, and then you've seen there's still people that deny climate change. So there's always going to be someone who's in a place to lose money right now who will cut off their nose to spite their face. So regulation's the only thing that can really change that.
Was that a Michael Jackson reference? Sorry. Did you lose steam there? Should we walk this back? I'm sorry, moonwalk this back a little bit.
Listen, all I have to say is ABC. It's easy as
All right, I think at the end of the day, though, when we're staring at the man in the mirror, and we're just asking him to make a change.
We just got to understand that businesses are bad. They're bad. Get 'em all.
You know, you rock my world.
And if you had to rate your beer, would you give it a Jackson 5? Oh God. Okay. I think we've gotten that out of our systems.
Whew. All right. So transitioning from black to white.
Yeah. Into a more thrilling conversation.
Until a more thorough conversation. We're transitioning over to sustainability. And I had a lot of things that I originally wanted to say, but I have lost all trains of thought. I want to double down on. You're very right. There's going to be a lot of businesses, a lot of organizations, a lot of industries that, like, unless it's profitable for them, especially unless it's profitable for them immediately, these regulations and these changes are going to be fought heavily. You know, the
Yeah.
people who are going to see a negative impact in the short term aren't going to often try to look at the long term and figure out how this is going to eventually benefit them. And I think that's one of the hardest things to do. If this was an easy task to do, more companies would be okay with more changes that happen, regulations that happen. I think if more people saw a bigger picture, you know, the what is often labeled as socialist, liberal, leftism, whatever, wouldn't be seen as so negative, right?
And that's it right there, right?
Yeah.
Though it's the fact that maybe it is socialist in the textbook definition of what socialism is, but does that necessarily mean it's bad?
Is that crazy? Because that is the point that I was getting to. It's just like growing up, you know, socialism, communism, and all that. It was said with this like such disdain and such like, oh my God, you're going to jail for like this like belief or this thought, and then you think about it more and just like, oh, well, this is actually commonplace. Like there's a lot of programs that actually are doing a lot of these things that we regard as like
Socialist,
social,
like Social Security,
right? Yeah, seriously, in the namesake, but
social
treasonous,
services,
right? Treasonous, you know,
treasonous.
yeah, things that are viewed in that regard, and then you slowly grow to understand that America is a me first country, um, and that's what makes it really hard to witness some things. And I don't know,
Yeah,
maybe if we didn't grow up where we did and didn't see a lot of people go through what they went through, maybe we wouldn't be trying to understand why we're not trying to help each other out a little more, trying to do things that are for the benefit of the community, with no like ulterior motive.
ulterior motive. Yeah,
Because that's
that's an
what frustrates me the
interesting
most.
idea, but it's so nuanced too. It's like, if we lived in a, just to, if we lived in a different country or we come from a different country, America is a great place to live. It's all about frame of reference. And I think the point,
I don't think America's an awful place to live.
no, I think it's just, we want to see it be
Better.
better than what it is. And what it is great in comparison to a lot of other places in the world. But just because you're better doesn't mean you can't keep getting better.
Better. I think it's the complicit nature of it all, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's it's hard
Well,
work
if you don't
beats
like it, go
right.
kick rocks.
Oh,
It's that
that has
idea.
another conversation point I wanted to talk about too. But it's that complicit nature. It's the old adage of hard work beats talent if talent doesn't work hard. For me, it's the oh, my life is pretty good, and anyone that's complaining must not like what makes my life pretty good, and they can go kick rocks. Versus saying like, oh, my life is pretty good. Could I have it better? Of course, I could have it better, but I could also do things for those who don't have it as good to make that better too. And if I make that better, I can make other things better for all of us. And if that person, if my neighbor is better off, that's eventually going to make me better off.
Yeah,
But
and
nobody
that's the
wants to think like
difficulty.
that.
Yeah,
It's so hard to
and
think like that.
I think that's that is like the structure of the country, though. It's and there's trade offs to everything, right? But like you said, America being a capitalist system, the capitalist system inherently is going to be more individualistic, and there is a benefit to having the freedom of speech. There are other places that if we said things that we've said, or others on other sides have said things they said, they'd be jailed, killed, whatever, and it would be perfectly fine, and people wouldn't bat an eye at it. Here it is a little different. So there is that kind of nuance to it that we're able to do that. But once again, it is back to what can we do to create like the best system possible, not just this is the system we chose. It never needs to change. It's better. Deal with it. We can incorporate different ideas. It's just that's the same thing, right? It's like you take a little bit of thought from everything until you have the best version of everything available. And then when something new comes along, you look at that, you go, can I add to what I have from that? Do I need to take away what I have from that?
Are you hearing what you're saying?
Uh no, I kind of just started flowing, man.
Poetry, man.
Stream of conscience.
Yeah,
Stream of consciousness.
yeah, streaming. Was what we're doing. Meta. Uh,
Oh, by the way, since our last live, that meta Twitter thing like came and went so fucking fast.
what, the threads?
Threats.
I still love threads. Threads is much.
Is it?
I much rather be on threads than Twitter.
I'd rather not be on
Either.
that form of social media. I'll put it that way.
That's fair. I think like we had some very good interaction. I think we've made some really good connections on threads versus anything we could have done with Twitter, just from the time that we were created. Like we came into existence at a time where like Twitter was already like booming.
True.
Being able to jump into threads the way that we did brought a lot of eyes and a lot of conversations. So it was actually, I still think there is a lane that exists because of how we jumped into it. That being said, Twitter's also just fucking awful. I think,
Yeah.
again, this is all third hand information, but Bronny suffered cardiac arrest. And then there's a big thing that came out on Twitter saying that had links to Pfizer and the different like chemical components to the COVID shots, and that ended up being false. But the issue was that Twitter allowed that false information to get processed and circulated as a true factual thing because there's no safeguards and regulations because Elon Musk is fucking everything, right?
Well, that and he, fired all of the people that would be maintaining those safeguards.
And that I think that's a very
There's no infrastructure for that.
It's awful, and again, this is all these people screaming like First Amendment rights or like freedom of speech, and then just not really like realizing what like freedom of speech actually means. That's
Right.
neither here nor there. What I was trying to bring up with you, what you were just saying about you went on such a beautiful like thread, and
A soliloquy, if you will.
about these changing of things and identifying, what works, what doesn't work, and as a collective, and being able to identify that. That's the yeast conversation. You just made a perfect parallel to it.
That's exactly what I was trying to do.
I asked you if you knew what you did, and you said no.
It, I was just seeing if you knew. That's just, I'm just seeing if you, catch up like mayonnaise.
Throw
I,
shit.
no, I think that's such a good. No, I was not connecting the dots there, but now that you mention that, I was not connecting the dots there, Doc. Um, no, that's such a good bridge back to what we were talking about with the yeast because you brought up the fact that okay, well, there is right now we're trying to come up with all these different yeasts and we're going to impart all these different things into it, and that's a me first reaction, right? And a lot of times I think science kind of runs off of that in terms of like this scientist, right, is on the cutting edge of whatever science they are, and they're really doing it because it's what they want to do, it's what they're interested in,
This person
but
was
it's how
like,
it gets applied that makes the
this
difference.
person was like scientist first, homebrewer second, and identified that the hops were the annoying, expensive part of the process,
Yeah,
and wanted to create something that was more affordable and easier to do, and bring out the flavors that they wanted without having to be the cost of the hops that they needed. Me first.
right. And by all means that is what like our system kind of inherently pushes forward, right? And you know long term this should be beneficial because if you can, now you have a lane for less expensive beer. Like you said, now we might have this IPA made out of yeast, made with yeast versus all these hops. That's $4 versus the $7 option. They're different beers, but it's a gateway beer, right? It'll get you in, get you hooked, then you start scratching, and you got to go get the IPA.
And then we're like, gotcha, bitch.
Yeah, exactly. But like there is a market for it, but that idea there of it being like the gateway option, that's where it comes together with like, okay, I have this idea, but how is it going to work for everybody? And this is how it works for everybody. Sure, maybe the hop farmers lose a little bit cut into this yeast thing because now there's going to be a new beer that doesn't use as much yeast or hops, right? You got to imagine there still needs to be hops there for bitterness. So they're still selling hops. They're just going to sell more of a different type of hop versus a tropical hop. Now it's just going to be a hop for bitterness instead, not for tropical notes. So there's a way, like you said, people can shift.
Yeah.
You got a bug?
I killed a fly.
Nice. Um, so it's like it's a way that all the industries can shift to still fit in the space the same and everybody can win versus what normally happens is say big hop has all the money and the influence, this yeast thing comes along, great idea, and instead of coexisting they just knock it down and push it out to the fringe, and then it's not ever a thing.
Which again is why I'm actually pro this yeast movement, because they seemingly recognize that, and are like, oh, initially, yeah, this was very selfish. Now that we're hearing the concern, let's think about this, because they're even talking about identifying and isolating flavors that aren't necessarily uh,
Hop related.
hop related or producible via
Yeah.
hop, right? Like they're like, okay, cool. If we can do everything still by that hop, but we can create this new thing, we have expanded the area of what beer can be beyond the tangents of like the throwing in. Imagine being able to create a plum flavor from the yeast instead of having to throw a bunch of plums in.
Right. And then those plums can go to people who need food instead of it going into a beer, you know?
All
It's
the oranges that we
it works.
used for this beer that we made, right? Love it. It's fun. It's enjoyable. It is for a good initiative, right? Like, I'm not saying we fucked up, right?
But
But
there's no other way to do it right now. I mean, if you want that, that's what you need. That's what is done, right? So that's the thing. And like I think you brought up a great point is that it's going to open up those doors to create more of the sustainability in different areas because right now I think they've gotten a pretty good handle on this is our grain waste from the process. You know, we have this spent mash, we're going to mash out, and then that's going to go somewhere. That's pretty easy. The water is a little bit more tricky because it has to be potable. There's microorganisms in there. There's chemistry happening after the process. This sustainability article kind of discusses like breweries having their own wastewater treatment plants. So you're uh, trying to minimize pollution, water pollution that way coming off of the brewing process instead of these breweries having to push all of that untreated water to a publicly owned water treatment facility, which is what would normally happen, and
well,
overflowing that.
that just became a very interesting thing to me because, especially again, talking about government overreach. So, or maybe underreach in this case. Imagine if breweries of a certain square footage got identified as these treatment facilities, and got a tax incentive to operate much to the contradiction of Jersey, right? Rather, Jersey penalizing you for being a brewery, but everywhere else uh, giving you an incentive to be a brewery, especially
Yeah.
noticing that breweries are popping up left and right. So your brewery of a certain size, you are able to get a tax incentive because you have now developed a water treatment element of it. And so now your, say, city of Philadelphia isn't necessarily running into a very limited amount of water treatment facilities throughout the city that end up being overloaded and containing different issues, or you're having your fucking issues within the river, chemicals and
Well, yeah,
latex being put into all the time. But that's a different issue, right?
The only issue there, and that's like a sustainability. I think that's one of those challenges
Are
that
we
were
talking about the
brought up.
river?
And no, just
Oh,
like
okay.
so you have this wastewater and it needs to be treated, right? And the issue though is for a wastewater treatment process,
Mm-hmm.
you kind of need space.
Yeah.
You at the very least need more tanks to
Okay.
settle out the solids. Um, I I wouldn't. I don't know what all is created chemically after the fact in each step that might require like aeration tanks and things of that nature. But then there now you need to introduce air. You need to have enough
Right.
space for all this stuff.
So,
It's spacious, is
no,
what I'm saying. So stuff in like a city, for example, even think of Love City, right? Like or Carbon Copy is a better example. Like they just barely fit where they are.
but this is where the square footage of places come into place, or the access to things like that, right? So when we think about it, right? Carbon Copy, it's not a player. Punch Buggy's not a player. Like, these aren't the people that we're talking about.
Sure.
Yards is a player. Yards, Victory. We have breweries, fucking Brixel, whatever, in like Allentown area. Sam Adams has this opportunity because
Places
they're
like Sam Adams, but those places might already even have stuff like that.
right. But
Interestingly enough.
yeah, interestingly enough, but saying okay, so if the tax incentive theoretically pays for the additional square footage that would have been needed in order to treat things. That's the tax incentive. So maybe it's a little bit more, and plus just to create a little bit more square footage of what you originally could have afforded in the first place, right? Now you have this brewery that can treat the water in the area that's not necessarily having to be owned and operated by the city or by the state, but helps the city and the state.
Yeah, it might be like an integrated thing where like they operate it, but it's city owned, but the brewery operates it on their property, and
So
they're able to take load off from the neighborhood. Like obviously that would they would have to do some. I'm sure some people come up with some smart idea to be able to integrate that into like the current sewage system and make that work. But if something like that is logistically possible, that would be great, because now you're able to mitigate, overflows from like flash flooding and storms
that's
from a city that is stuck between two huge rivers,
at least it's not three rivers
you know?
stadiums.
Yeah, but the thing about Pittsburgh is it's both surrounded by three rivers and surrounding three rivers, but it's also mountainous as fuck out of nowhere. So all of it just runs into the river.
Also,
This is
does
like
Pittsburgh have any waterfalls? Like, I'm just trying to figure this out too. Like,
waterfalls. No, all of the rivers just kind of like carved out the mountains. It's it's weird. It's such an interesting topography. Philly is much more like traditional in the sense it's just flat.
It's like
Philly is as flat as you could
you got
be in the
Pittsburgh being
Northeast.
like three different like areas. Like here's San Francisco. Here's like
Yeah, like it's the entire Bay Area. It's the Three Rivers area. It's like it's crazy. It's like you have to go a mile and it takes 40 minutes because you have to go through a tunnel, and it's the only tunnel for how many miles. It's crazy. But that's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
For something like Philly, like if they could do something like that, that would be super dope. It's difficult though, in not even just monetarily to make it happen. It's just literally, where does it go? It's physically the space.
Yeah.
How do you figure that out? So that's where I think the cutting edge in environmental process technology comes into play as we progress on, and by the time we're into it. Where is technology going to be? Are we able to create something like, for example, this isn't environmentally related, but you're talking about, like, we were just talking about like water heaters, right? When we were growing up, water heater was just a big old tank, right? And it heated the water with gas, much like that right there. There it is, right? And then say you like taking long hot showers. Well, eventually you're going to run out of hot water, and then it's just going to be cold until it can heat that water back up. And that
right. And now fuck
but
you if you're
now
in
we
an
have
apartment complex that's sharing that between 2 units, 3 units.
Yep. So there's that. But now we have tankless. And with tankless, you're pretty much good. Like the technology has improved. So now
water runs through it and it instantly.
It's just far more efficient at heating the water. So
Now
things like that.
Going back to like this modified system of things, right? Traditionalists have you would be like, oh, build a fire, warm your water, and throw it on yourself. If we continued the way of that like thinking and that logic of like, well,
Yeah.
God would have provided you, I was like, well, what? Like if I somehow got dropped into fucking Alaska, I would never get warm water. Like what the fuck does that mean?
Yeah, no, it's once again, it's about reinventing the process.
The
It's
wheel.
about process modifications. Yeah. If a wheel can help, let's throw a wheel in there. I don't know.
But
it's all about
I'm
process
I'm sure
modifications.
the wheel was looked at with much disregard, like much disdain. Like
Well, it's funny. It's funny because my YouTube algorithm is completely weird and fucked. I forget what video I was listening to,
was
but
it
it
from the
was like
bike
a
lane
historical
person?
video.
No.
No, different lane. This is my like history slash religious history slash ancient civilization history lane of YouTube, where you met like they mentioned the fact that it's like, okay, well, the people that actually created the wheel, like actually invented the wheel, didn't even use it really. Like they invented it, but there wasn't mass use of it because they didn't have domesticated livestock to
Really?
make that wheel super useful at the time. Yeah. So that was like, oh, that's odd.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, it really makes your head spin. Um what were we talking about?
I don't know. This is the
We're
issue
going
of
around in
every episode now.
circles.
Fuck off. This is the issue with every one of these episodes. We get
Yeah,
into this.
circular logic. That's right. That is an issue. Instead, in, we could have. Ah, damn it! I was going to say something about spoke.
Mm, no, I think you spoke enough.
Double spoke, like a bike. Sustainability.
I feel like we're
I'm
just like really
interested.
turning our wheels and going nowhere, like a Peloton.
Like the Peloton, especially if you have it hooked into the ceiling. So no, I think the water thing, and we've said this before. The water thing is really the big issue
Yeah,
because
that's the big waste.
it's the big use in beer. Um, so it's kind of like how do is there I'm kind of interested in like how is there anything else one that water can be used for as is without needing to be treated, or maybe even just does it need less treatment, so now it's like a smaller process that is easier to install with an incentive. It's not a logistical issue, it's just a money issue.
Right.
And so now we can come in with subsidies and incentives and make that happen. um, are there any other issues? And I think, on the industrial scale, environmentally, obviously heating and cooling is a big one. Um, but that's something that's solvable through optimizing the process. And that's also something that's resolved through like the yeast GMO thing, going back to that. And I kind of quick mentioned that earlier, but like just imagine we create this yeast that can resist higher temperatures or resist colder temperatures or just increase the temperature range on a lager yeast that's imparting that particular flavor,
Oh,
but we just want a lager yeast.
oh,
But instead of it, yeah, like say like the lager yeast needs to be below 50 degrees,
and you're in
45,
Texas.
50 degrees. And yeah. Well, now your lager yeast, you've developed this yeast that can survive up to 60 degrees.
Wow,
So now you don't have to cold ferment it, and you can
wow.
still create a good lager. So it's like these types of things, like how do is
Mm-hmm.
that possible? Yeast is so touchy. So it's gonna take I think it's gonna take time, and it's gonna take
Mm-hmm.
considerable effort, pointed effort to make that thing. But like if you can do that, right? Electricity costs down because you don't have to run a cooler the entire time. You don't have to cool this thing. Um, Heating. If the more efficient we make our heaters for these processes, the more efficient the heating is. Just it's just so many different things, but uh, I think for the GMO and sustainability thing integrated together, I think that's where I'm most interested in seeing is yeast that is more temperature resistant to wider ranges, and kind of seeing how that can create less utility usage for a brewery. And that's something that the breweries obviously would like, because that's less money out of their pocket, but it's also more sustainable. So yeah.
Yeah. These are the fun conversations for me. I think um, going back to the reason why I was talking about the water treatment and everything as well, the big issue that we see with breweries a lot of the times is the signal for change, or for better words, the signal of gentrification to come. However, if this was actually a signal of a better investment within the area, that could change a lot. I don't know how many
Great point.
I don't know how many areas I see that we could walk around in Kensington and Cobbs Creek and uh, Kingsessing. Like there's so many impoverished areas in Philly, and we can walk around and see what were once viable industrial buildings. That's why a lot of people are there anyways, is because like we're talking about a
Yeah.
lot of blue collar fucking talk about Detroit, right? Like let's talk about like
Reading
it's
even,
yeah,
honestly.
these areas that were once powerhouses because of industry. um
Mm-hmm.
Fuck, Hershey isn't Hershey if it wasn't for the investment that Milton had in that area, saying like, fuck, this is what we're gonna do, and you know what, because I care, we're gonna add all these other elements to it, which ended up being the reason why Hershey is sustainable, right?
Right.
um but when you look at that, it's just like, okay, cool. If we actually make an investment into here as a property that is not only for improving the area on a property tax value or like business tax value, but also that is going to serve and either um, what the fuck, infrastructure improvement, uh, climate improvement, just like quality of life improvement. If that becomes the main focal point, rather than saying, I'm all for knocking down a building if there's no actual like usage for this building, but if it can become a dual usage building and it's not just like, oh, here's a bunch of new apartments. Like
Oh my God.
if
Yeah.
we could
Yeah.
build apartments on something that is actually sustainable, and like, oh, through them flushing their fucking toilets, it actually then goes into a bigger system that cleans the water in the area, that is that connects from everything else. And because we're going to sell these properties at a premium, we're also going to be able to now do the renovations of the area to create all these pipes into this area in order to make it this wastewater facility that no longer has to travel this far, is on these old pipes that are going to burst, that are going to create sinkholes and create other issues. It's that extra step. It's not just saying, oh, how do we improve this area? How do we improve this area? Keep those that are here, save them money, allow them to reinvest into the area that they have been born, raised, and lived in, and are going to continue to hopefully be able to do that in. Because yeah, it's nice to have, like, I'm in this area, I'm in Fishtown, I am now here, and this is a community that I want to get back to, but that's how I was raised, to be a active member of my community.
Yeah.
However, you want to empower everybody in order to do that. You don't want people to come in and push out everybody else and create a new community. I want to learn about this community. This community is Irish as fuck. Granted, I have some Irish ancestry, so that's going to actually be pretty cool to see what that kind of community looks like and that culture looks like. However, it's I'm not coming in here and expecting like this crazy black culture to exist either.
True. And I think that's kind of the discussion of gentrification, right? It's where it's like you're going into a new area, and you shouldn't want to go in there and just push the quote unquote undesirables out, what you deem to be undesirable. It's like you want to go in there and
Add to it.
be a business that can add to the community, and whatever deficiencies are there from an economic standpoint, a structural, infrastructural standpoint, you're able to use your money and sway and power to affect good change there. And I think, like you said, that's such a great breweries can be that beacon, you know? Instead of going in and being like the Paul Revere of gentrification, they can be with Paul Revere of
The whiteys are coming. The
change,
whiteys are
of
coming.
good change. Yeah. The whites are coming. The bearded plaited whites are coming.
That's a very fair point. Unfortunately, I don't have a bathroom that is very close by to me. I have to run up 2 flights of stairs in order to do that. For now,
Yeah.
there is plumbing down here. This will change.
But
I would allow you to, not allow you, I would like you to bring up any last talking points for right now, until next time.
yeah, no, I think we've thoroughly had a great conversation on these topics today with genetic modification and sustainability. And I think that's something as we continue to, you know, as we continue to learn more about it, we can keep coming back to these conversations and keep adding to, you know, those ideas, because it's only going to, one, help us, you know, when we decide to finally, you know, get at it. And but if we can, you know, learn and kind of bring that outside perspective, and just say, throw out ideas that kind of, maybe they sound dumb to people who are in the industry, but maybe they'll work.
Right.
um it's one of those things where it's like you throw out an idea because you don't know what you don't know, but then it actually, someone will actually go, okay, maybe that'll actually work. Because before they were just stuck in, this is how it's done, and nothing else, nothing like that could possibly work, or they just weren't thinking of it that way.
Right.
And here we come, being the idiots we are, coming up with this idea, and then it's like we backed into a good idea.
That's
But
usually
how
what I
much of
do.
invention, yeah, how much of invention is just backing into a good idea, right?
Chocolate chip cookies were an accident. Never forget.
Reese's peanut butter cups, right? Someone
Accident.
just they got their chocolate in someone else's peanut butter, and it turned out to be great.
Whenever I do that, it usually is an issue.
Well, thank you for coming on for another YouTube live of the tube of the U. It's been great.
Imagine
As
saying such a bad joke that you revert back to tube of the U.
tube of the U, yes.
That's how
That,
bad
I
what
mean,
I
that's
said
better.
was.
That's better than where we ended. Where we started was better than where we ended. So
That's what I was talking about with Reese's Pieces.
do not say Reese's Pieces. You know what? Let's just end this.
All right. Well, until next time.
Peace. Or